Welcome to the Iowa RIA and Iowa Landlord Association, where we educate, advocate, and empower real estate investors.
Okay, so what I want to talk about today is the eviction moratorium. And we need to be, I think this was really, the landlords got it in the neck. Nobody else got treated as badly as the landlords. We didn't have a situation where they said, oh, you don't have any food, you can go in and take all the food you want at Hy-Vee, fill up your cart for free, go to the gas station and get as much gas as you want for free. But with the landlords, they said, oh, well, you don't have to pay, you can just hang out and you don't have to pay for where you are. And the original CARES Act there was a state moratorium and that went away in May. That was on all evictions, so that's no longer in effect. There's two more federal eviction moratoria, the CARES Act, and probably the most important thing with that is that from now on, when you file an FED, you need to do a CARES Act certification saying this is not a Section 8, it's not federal housing, there's not a federally insured mortgage involved. Now, most people don't have those, so the CARES Act stuff doesn't really affect you, but it is another, again, more paperwork, another thing to screw up if you don't know what you're doing. So there's a form for that. You just want to make sure you fill that form out and file it with in the FED. Now, the next one, though, is the CDC eviction moratorium that was started on September 4th. CDC is the Center for Disease Control. The legal authority for this was pretty weak. Under the statute that they're using, it talks about their fumigation and sanitation power, that the CDC can go and they can fumigate buildings or they can destroy property because of disease and other action. And so the other action was this sweeping federal moratorium for the entire country, saying that you can't evict certain types of people. Now, there are criteria for this type of, it has to be an unpaid rent eviction. And then the tenant has to meet certain criteria. They have to have attempted to obtain a rental assistance, not have an income over $99,000, be tried to make rental payments, and if they're evicted, they'll become homeless, apparently, or have no place to live. And so one of the means that the CDC, what they provided was a declaration, and you just have to sign this declaration under penalties of perjury that you fit these criteria. Now, the problem is that, and I was very disappointed in the Iowa Supreme Court, because what they did was bought into this extreme, I guess I can only characterize it as extreme left view, is that all you have to do is serve this declaration on the landlord, and that's the end of the story. That the FED then either is put off or dismissed. Now, what's wrong with that is that there are these criteria that the tenant has to fit. And what if they don't fit those? What if they're mistaken? What if they're lying? What if the landlord has evidence of this? What if the court doesn't believe the tenant? Well, that's all out the window. So essentially the court is deprived of being a court. They're not going to be finding the facts. All the tenant has to do is fill that thing out and give it to the landlord, and that's the end of the story. So the choice basically, once they do that, if it's an unpaid rent FED, is that either it was going to be dismissed without prejudice, or then they could put it off to December 31st, which is supposedly when this is ending. I'm not sure it's going to end December 31st. I look in the newspaper and I see a lot of this sort of tenant activist stuff screaming about this tsunami of evictions. And in fact, I got a call from a reporter at the Daily Iowan, which is a student newspaper, and she was giving me all this stuff about, do you have reports of illegal evictions by landlords? Students are going to be thrown out on the street, et cetera, et cetera. And I told her, I said, look, I have not had a single complaint from a tenant about an illegal eviction. And I said, what I'm hearing is that most tenants are paying their rent, and that the ones who are taking advantage of this, unfortunately, a good number of them are people that were problematic beforehand. And in fact, again, this is anecdotal, but I had a tenant tell me, he said, well, I have the money to pay the rent, but I'm not going to because I know I can't get evicted. This was under the state eviction moratorium. So that's, again, anecdotal, but it doesn't smell very well as far as I'm concerned about how this is being used. Now, I know there's legitimate people out there, but it's also a way for tenants who are on the make to take advantage of it. So basically, for right now, what we're looking, though, is a situation where you can't do an unpaid rent FED definitely until December 31st, and then we'll just see. Like I said, I think there's a good chance they'll be extended. So where are we with FEDs? Now, this is not all FEDs. So you can still do, and the Supreme Court in issuing their supervisory order made that clear. It said this order does not prevent the eviction of a tenant, lessee, or resident for a reason other than non-payment of rent. Okay, so so if you have a holdover tenant, you have a violation of lease, clear and present danger, all those types of evictions can still go forward. Now, one of the things is though that you know, I did a holdover eviction not too long ago, and we gave notice, I think June 12th, and so it was a month-to-month. So that was way in advance. It was like, I think like 40 or 50 days notice to terminate the month-to-month, and then we had the FED, the original FED we got on August 31st. So we had to wait for that. And then the tenant turned around and got a lawyer who was just ridiculous, had no case at all, but just filed it and filed a bond. So that got put off for 60 days. And then after they lost that, they tried to do another motion for reconsideration. So we finally did get the FED. And then when we showed up after the lawyer and the tenant saying, I can't move out, the tenant was already out. So that was really kind of left a bad taste in terms of that. And so this is somebody I think had 80 or 90 days notice and still was able to, and she kept throwing up a bunch of smoke about COVID and everything. And we made it clear that she didn't qualify and she wasn't sick with COVID, you know, and she had enough money to pay $1,000 appellate bond and hire a lawyer. So it really felt like she could have gotten another place. So this is the downside. You don't, when I look at the newspaper or the media, I'm stuff about, oh, poor tenants, and they're just not getting the complete story. So you want to think about that in terms of if you do have situations with holdovers, if you've got someone who's violating the lease, if you've got a clear and present danger FED, those still can go through, but you're facing an uphill battle. You really need to dot your I's and cross your T's in terms of how you do these. So one of the things that I would say about this is that I really recommend, and this was happening anyway with a lot of the landlords that I represent, are moving to month-to-month leases. And so a month-to-month is, you can still terminate the month-to-month and do a holdover. Now, if you're saying I'm terminating your month-to-month because you're not paying the rent, then you may still be back in the same situation. So you really, if you're going to terminate a month-to-month, you really should probably have a reason for it that you can articulate. You know, it's not, I think, a good idea to say to the tenant, I can do whatever I want, I'm kicking you out, I don't even need a reason. That's a little bit of a red flag. It's also not something you would want to do to a court right now in terms of the month, you know, termination. So, but if they're a problem tenant, the month-to-month is really easy. And that's what my landlords are saying. They're like, you know what, we have difficult tenants. We like the month-to-month because then we can terminate them. And frankly, I'm a big, that's my big thing now. I'm on this crusade for month-to-month. It's very old school. It's the way everybody used to do it. You'd have a handshake. Now you can definitely, I would have a lease, but you can have a month-to-month lease. And the way it works is everybody's happy. If the tenant's not happy or the landlord's not happy for whatever reason, then that ends the problem. And it's a very, I think, realistic and effective way to deal with any kind of problem. Again, if you're not happy, the solution is that you get a new tenant, or for the tenant that they get a new landlord. And so that's what I would say. So again, the FED stuff was always sticky, was always a little difficult to do. It's probably the hardest thing I do as an attorney. And now it's become even more difficult just because the judges are really bending over backwards not to evict tenants. And if there's the slightest bit of COVID being raised, then it's just, you know, like I said, I had to file a 20-page appeal brief, and then I had to do a 7-page response brief. And it was okay for the landlord because I had swapped them for a generator conversion. So that was a nice deal. So I got my generator converted, and they got 30 pages of brief. So, but you're not always going to be in that position. So, but definitely, like I said, we're brave new world you know, and for landlords. It used to be if you wanted to unpaid rent, boom, you're right out of there. Now it's, you know, my gut feeling is that December 31st thing may get, you know, pushed off. And certainly I think we're in an atmosphere where magistrates are increasingly reluctant to want to evict anybody. Any questions? Did anyone have any comments?
Yes, I do. Hi, this is PK. Yeah, back to your question that we had served a lease termination notice to one of our tenant, and she did not move out, and judge simply allowed her to stay there extra month, and then she finally moved out after 2 months. So we lost that 2 months of rent right there. Judge even didn't look at it, anything, no discussion, nothing like that. Judge just gave her the time. Okay, you will move out end of November, and that's what happened.
So you mean you went into, which county was this in?
Here in Polk County, Des Moines.
Okay, Polk. I mean, I have to say Polk County is just totally insane. I mean,
Yeah.
I hear the when somebody tells me a crazy story, 80% of the time it's Polk County, because they just kind of just do crazy stuff.
Yeah, the judges here, they are simply not helping the landlord right now, put it that way. Anybody,
yeah, I was gonna say that's always been true of Polk County. Plus, it's just very chaotic. You know what I mean? There's just not a lot of, they're all sort of do whatever they want, and you up is down and down is up in that particular county. So I have to say though that, that's, it's just, that's become par for the course now. And, it's useful to have, I mean, like I said, even as an attorney, and I specialize in this area, I even specialize in small claims appeals. I had a heck of a time, up against this other attorney getting the thing through. So I think that's what we're facing going forward for landlords. It's just a very different atmosphere. And so again, that's why I'm big on the month-to-month, because what I see, and this is partly Johnson County, but tenants will sign these year leases, and then they'll have problems, and then they don't have an effective means to deal with the problem. Whereas a month-to-month, and that allows them to be able to say, okay, well, at least I can terminate the lease if I've got a problem. But the same thing with the landlords. I mean, it's very easy to get rid of a problem tenant. You just, like I said, you just terminate it. Whereas if you're going to say they violated the lease, you have to prove it and go into court and argue about whether or not they actually violated the lease and this and that. So I think right now, just as for self-preservation, if I was signing a lease now, I would be doing a month-to-month, because we don't know how this eviction moratorium, and at least then you could potentially terminate them on the month-to-month, whereas you may not be able to kick people out for unpaid rent for a while. We'll just have to see what happens as we get closer to December. But I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the CDC to go ahead and extend that, again, temporarily extend that. Again, we'll just have to see what happens.
I got a question about this month to month they are talking about. We used to do month to month, 3 months, 6 months. Is it worth it to put family for just 1 month and collect $700-800 rent or $900 rent? Then when you give them the 30-day notice to move out because of something, then they stay there another month free, and you have collected only $700-900 worth,
Well,
rent.
I think you want to do it better.
And when they move out, okay, no, that's what I was going. And when they move out, you have more than $800 or $900 worth of damage because we are terminating their lease on the second month.
Okay, let me just start off by saying that the first thing you're going to have to do is make sure you get good tenants. I mean, that's really key, is that you want a tenant. The old school way of doing it, like I said, was month-to-month, and people will be living in 20 years on a month-to-month lease. Okay, a month-to-month lease does not last a month. What a month-to-month lease is, it's what's called a periodic lease. Month-to-month lease could be perpetual. It could last 100 years. And every month it renews. So at the end of the month, it automatically pops up again, unless one of the other side. Now, if you put those people that are problem tenants, right, and you don't want to have them, and they're causing you all sorts of trouble, and you want to get rid of them in a year lease, that would not stop them from being problem tenants, right? That would just mean in order to evict them, you would have a much more difficult time of getting rid of them, right? And if they don't pay the rent, it's exactly the same problem as with a year lease as you have with a month-to-month lease. So like I said, it's your choice, but the idea that somehow that I can magically make all my problems go away as long as I put in the lease is just an illusion that a lot of landlords have. It's like, oh, that's a problem, I'll write it in the lease. That doesn't stop the problem from happening. And so, like I said, what the beauty of it right now is you get to choose. And so if you prefer a year lease, definitely go with that. But I want to put out there as an option and make sure people are aware of that and say, look at the advantages and disadvantages, and then you get to make the choice in terms of how you want to go forward with it. So, because the reality is you can never get rid of problem tenant. I mean, you can never entirely not have problem tenants. So how do you deal with them after you've got them? And that's, I think, that's why you want to have a lease. I mean, you wouldn't want to just have a handshake month to month, because then you don't have all the provisions built in that you want to have. So again, what's beautiful about it is you get to choose. And if you like a year lease, that's great. Go ahead with the year lease. But I just like to put it out there. And right now, like I'm saying, if you're signing leases and you have a month to month and they don't pay the rent, it'd be nice to have another problem, but at least you have the potential right now of being able to terminate them. Because right now, for the past year, if you had a year lease, you're stuck with those tenants. There's absolutely nothing you can do to get them out of there. And they're not going to pay, and they have a perfect legal right not to. Now you can sue them for it. I mean, that's another problem for this. It's a problematic for the tenants, is that, yeah, you can't evict them. And they're like, okay, I'll stay. And they're just racking up that rent every month. So they're going to, I talked to a tenant who was actually from another state, but she had racked up $20,000 of debt because she had an expensive lease. So she was facing this huge debt. And so this eviction moratorium does not serve tenants very well either. I mean, a better solution would have been direct aid and allowed them to then pay the rent and then keep the system going. But this is how they chose to do it.
Yeah, the whole system looks like they are kind of anti-landlord when you look at everything, you know. Okay,
no,
landlord can't do, landlord can't do this, landlord can't do that, landlord supposed to be doing this, and there is nothing for tenant. And tenant even don't bother to go and apply for their help.
No, but the thing is, the reason for that is that there's enough bad apple landlords. And again, that's what's great about ILA, is that you're all trying to be good landlords, but there's enough bad ones out there that they've given all the good ones a bad name. And so people have a bad attitude about landlords, slumlord, you know, and there's truth to that. Now there's a lot of bad tenants too, but that isn't getting out there. So again, that's a real problem. And then we can all deal with that. Every time a landlord messes over a tenant, it makes it worse for landlords. But every time a tenant messes over a landlord, then it makes it worse for tenants. So when I started doing this, what I vowed to do was say there's a war between landlords and tenants. Let's stop the war. And so we can all, just by being good landlords, make it better for everybody. And every time you do that, you're helping everybody. It's not always obvious, but every time you're a good landlord and do the right thing, and that doesn't mean you have to be walked all over. What I suggest is you want to be firm but fair. You let people know what the rules are, and you give them every chance. But then if they're not, that's what eviction. That's why when saying eviction, if you're going to break the rules, if you're going to not pay your rent, there's going to be consequences. And so that's what I'm in favor of. But it's the reason we're in the state where we are now is because there's just unfortunately bad landlords out there, and so we need to do the best we can to change it, in our own behavior.
Mr. Warnock, this is Craig Wetzel. On this continuing resolution for 1 week in Congress right now, I'm hearing that they're planning to do this COVID bill, which would have more moratorium. Have you heard anything about that? And should we be calling people?
I mean, it's just one of those things. It's like, it would not, I would be surprised if they don't extend it. I mean, I really would. I mean, it's just sort of one of those things of that, this is now the coal, I mean, it's right or left, the CDC this was done under the Trump administration, so right or left, the public opinion and the view of the governing classes has coalesced around this idea that, okay, the way to deal with the tenant problems is to have a eviction moratorium. And since it's temporary, it's temporary. So we have these continuing series of temporary things. And I mean, the other thing that's going to happen is come summer, when everyone gets or whenever they get vaccinated, we still have economic problems. We'll need to extend this. I mean, we may see this for another couple of years. I mean, I think probably chances are when the COVID comes out that it'll end. But it's quite possible that this ends up being a sort of a temporary permanent solution. And it's ridiculous. I mean, you cannot have a system. The entire system depends on the money flow, and to come in at one point and choke off that money flow, I mean, the landlords can't pay their property tax. They can't pay their mortgage. I mean, there's an incredible amount of investment, and, the city and and county and everything. It's all depending on this. And to say, oh, we're going to choke that off or put it all on the landlord is insane. But that's where they are. And, but what I would say as a result is make sure you have a month, make sure you switch to month to month. Don't be signing any year leases right now.
Okay.
I have a question. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So during a moratorium, if you have month-to-month lease, you could still terminate that month-to-month,
Potentially.
even during a moratorium?
Yeah. I mean, if you're saying to the person, you're not paying the rent, so I'm terminating your month-to-month lease, then you have a problem. And if you're not saying it, but that's actually what you're doing, that's also a little, I mean, really, ideally with the month-to-month, you would want to have some other problem, and you want to be, if the judge is saying why, they push you on it, you want to be able to say, well, this is a problem tenant. That's basically what the best thing to be able to do is say this person, I mean, that's what we do with my holdover. They had this whole sob story, and we came back and said, you know what? This tenant has repeatedly caused problems. We had to call the police a bunch of times for noise. The neighbors have been complaining. They vandalized the unit, and frankly, that's why we're not renewing. And I had another situation with a landlord, and the person wasn't paying, but they also had problems. And I said to him, okay, well, the year lease is running out. Just send them a letter and saying, look, your lease has run out, and you need to vacate. And so she gave it to her manager, and the manager sent the letter saying, oh, we're not renewing your lease because you didn't pay the rent. And so that just completely blew up everything, And so you just need to be careful. You don't want to be misrepresenting things, but you're really going to be better off if your termination is going to be for, like I said, because of a problem tenant.
And you can still go back later and get a judgment on unpaid rent.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the problem is, a lot of times you want to get possession back. Obviously, you want to get a paying tenant in there, and also they're necessarily maybe judgment proof because they have no money. But yeah, I mean, that's the other thing for the tenants. This is a terrible deal for tenants because it's allowing them to stay where they are, not deal with the fact they can't pay, and then they're hugely in debt. And so, they're going to be carrying this, credit they could be mess up their credit. They've got this huge debt. So that's not a good solution either. Yeah, that's what I would say is that I think that it's, it's just a mess. And the more I just shake my head, it's frustrating.
Could you elaborate again for me, Christopher, what your position on this checklist initiative that was coming out of Johnson County? It was funny that you said that Polk County is 80% of the issues you hear about are from Polk County. In Polk County, it's exact opposite. It's Johnson County.
Well, here's the difference.
Yeah.
The magistrates in Johnson County all try to work together. And so they have kind of a unified way of dealing with stuff. And we actually sat down with them a year or two ago and had a sort of roundtable and a discussion, and then met with the bar to talk about landlord-tenant issues. So they tried to get all on the same page on how they're dealing with a lot of issues. And that's really great because hopefully everybody knows what the deal is. And you don't get one magistrate and get one result and another magistrate and get another result. I will say, on the other hand, that, Johnson County, People's Republic of Iowa City, I mean, there's a lot of this is where you're going to get a lot of the sort of lefty and even extreme lefty stuff coming out of here. So that's not an undeserved reputation. Now, Zach Walz is a senator, state senator. I think he's a good guy. I think he has his heart in the right place, but his approach is the classic lefty, more government regulation is good. And, my philosophy is that you need to have the government to come in and set up a framework, that's fair. But then within that framework, people get to decide how they want to handle things as much as possible. But you need you can't have law of the jungle. and you can't have complete total regulation. You need to have a fair framework that's easy to use. So the checklist, what I'd say about the checklist stuff is that I think it's great for sorry, you need to mute there. I think the checklist stuff is awesome as evidence. I mean, if you're going into that unit and you're going around and you're having yourself or one of your employees or somebody check that for you and look at all the stuff and particularly take pictures, that's key. I mean, if you go in, if the tenant's like, oh, it was damaged, you can go into the magistrate and you know, with the security deposit case and say, no, here you go. Here's the checklist, here's the pictures, and that's very strong evidence. You're really doing yourself a favor by doing that. The problems come in that, you know, tenants, frankly, are not up for, they don't have their act together a lot of the time. And some do. There's some great tenants out there. They're very organized, but there's a lot of, I mean, there's a reason people are landlords and a reason people are tenants. If you're a landlord, you have your act together enough to run a business and to do all this maintenance and do everything. I mean, you're practical, can-do people. And so, you know, the checklist stuff obviously makes sense for practical, can-do people because you can handle it. But shoot, I mean, there's a significant chunk of tenants, they can't handle that. You give them a checklist to fill out and they can't fill it out or get it back to you. And so that's a little bit of a problem. The other thing that I don't like about the thing is that it imposes a huge mandatory paperwork burden on people. I mean, if you're not interested in doing this, you still have to. I mean, it's not it stops being a choice and turns into something that everybody has to do no matter what. And if you lose a checklist for somebody, you can't get the security deposit back from them. You forfeit your right to get the security, no matter what the evidence is, no matter what damage they do, you can't get it because you lost that form. Or if you don't know about it, which people aren't necessarily going to know about this, again, you have the same problem. When you, under this legislation, if you don't get the checklist and save that, and then when you do the deposit withholding, send that along with the deposit withholding form, you can't withhold anything from their deposit. So it just has these draconian penalties, it seems to me, and a big paperwork, you know, that you have to do. And whereas the benefit, I think, is something that's you know, there if you want to do it voluntarily. I mean, I'm 100% in favor of checklist. I think it's a great way to operate, but I don't want to see it imposed by fiat. And I would be a little worried about the form they come up with. I mean, they may or may not do that. But that's a little worrisome. So that's just my 2 cents, and there's a lot of different views on it. But I'm kind of coming from a more libertarian perspective, and I like to see everybody able to work things out. That's why, like I said, that's why I like the month-to-month. So rather than having all these rules and regulations that don't seem to get enforced, that's hard to get enforced, then, you know, if you again, you have a problem with a tenant, you terminate the tenancy. If the tenant has a problem with you, they do the same thing. And that way everybody's happy. And I think it's, again, would go a certain amount of way to making landlords have a better reputation, because you can't lock a tenant into a lease and then not do the maintenance or not take care of stuff. If the tenant's not happy, then they have an easy remedy, which is to get out of the lease. So that's just my 2 cents. But again, there's many different ways of approaching this. And I wouldn't say, I come from a particular perspective and I completely understand. For example, I was talking to Andrew about, you know, wanting to raise up the view of the profession and that checklists are a good thing. And so I certainly think that I certainly agree with that. And it's just everybody's got a different view about maybe how to implement it.
I guess, hi, this is Mary Davis in Cedar Rapids. I have a perspective in terms of the list too that I think should be considered, especially if legislation is introduced and some are in favor of it. The issue we have in Cedar Rapids is that the city council, both in Marion and Cedar Rapids, believe that they should control landlords and what happens in landlords. And so they have passed some ordinances that are, I think, outside of their purview. I think they actually should not be able to have such language in an ordinance. But for example, they say in Cedar Rapids that all landlords have to do a background check and prescribe what that is, whereas I don't think the city ought to be involved in the landlord business at all from this perspective of deciding how they're going to process an application. And yet Cedar Rapids believes they ought to be able to do that. And Marion, on the other hand, believes that they should dictate that landlords must include all individuals that may be on leased housing for any property for any reason. They basically say, well, you have to accept them. And I think that that becomes problematic when we have city governments saying, well, we want to tell you how to run your business, which is essentially what they're doing, rather than just looking at the property from the standpoint of, is the property safe? That's a whole different perspective.
Well, you know why they do that though, is because they've
Oh, I know
got
why they
people
do it. I
complaining.
just say
You
I
got-
don't agree.
I know, but I'm saying is that right now the atmosphere has become very much more pro-tenant. And so,
Oh, sure.
and then the reaction is always, if there's a problem, we're going to pass a law. And so that's the thing. But the problem is that, like I said, you got these bad actor landlords who cause these problems, and then the tenant, then that's how the tenant reaction to it. And so you end, and this is web of regulations that are very draconian. If you don't follow it, then you get nailed for it. And so I guess what I would say is that I think that running the business for landlords, I mean, I think that's important to do. But at the same time that again, that's why I come to the month to month, because again, if the tenant isn't satisfied, fine, they've got a way to get out of that. And I prefer that to having, because like for the tenants, they'll come and say, they didn't fix this, they didn't do that, they didn't do this, and like, isn't that illegal? And I said, well, maybe it is, but there's no mechanism to do anything about it. Is the judge going to come in like every week, come and check to see whether the thing's been fixed? They're not. There's no way to do that. So you pass all these laws, and they don't even get enforced. Or if they do, they do it in a very uneven way that just nails the little guy or catches out the unwary. The big guys know how to get around all this stuff. And so I think that, here's the thing. I think these are legitimate problems. And I think that, something needs to be done about them. What I object to is, it's an impractical means. And a lot of it's symbolic. If we pass a law, then we did something, and then they don't worry about the consequences of what happens. But, if you find out about it, what's sad about it is there's usually a way around everything. I mean, if you're a bad actor, you can always wiggle out of it, and I think the most important thing is to make sure that, you're treating the tenants fairly in these situations. There is, you obviously want to screen your tenants. And I think that when they take that away, I mean, Iowa City had this whole thing where you had to take Section 8, and they danced around whether it was mandatory or not. But, this idea that this voluntary federal program should then be forced on landlords, I just thought that was a crazy idea, because Section 8, you really need to know what you're getting yourself into with that. And I have landlords that say to me, they have Section 8 tenants who are great. There's some of the tenants who stay the longest, they're great tenants, and then they get paid, their rent's being paid for, and they say that's great. On the other hand, Section 8 tenants can be really bad tenants too. And so it really needs to be a voluntary decision whether you get into that. And if you require it, then you're going to people are not going to do it and wiggle out of it. So I tend to agree with you that, I'm not sure that I would say that the city should be deprived of all ability to do anything, but I think that they tend to take a meat axe approach, and it's not practical what they're doing. It doesn't even accomplish the goals that they want to accomplish. And that's problematic too. And
and that's part of my argument, Christopher. That's part of my argument is that you can mandate these things. Unfortunately, the city doesn't have a mechanism within which to really enforce those things, and so then it sets up essentially all landlords are bad landlords in terms of attitude, and that's simply not true. We probably have maybe a 3%. 3 percentage points as far as bad landlords in our area. The rest of us are all pretty darn good, in varying levels, of course, but still, I think that unfortunately they look to the 3% as opposed to the 97%. So,
no, and I agree with that.
I want to get PK has had his hand up for a long time. You have a question?
Yes, there is a couple of questions on that move-in checklist. What we've been doing, like I have 2 moving checklist for each tenant when they move in. We give them the key and we give them a move-in checklist, and we ask them to sign one in our office with the blank one. When you bring your moving list, you take this one, throw it away. If you don't bring your moving list within 48 hours, then we are keeping this and assuming everything is okay in the apartment. Is that something okay or not? That is the first thing. And the second thing is that Section 8 tenant we were talking about, wouldn't be better for the Section 8 inspector to come at the end of their, I mean, when the Section 8 tenant, they move out, wouldn't be better for Section 8 inspector to come and check their apartment, how it is when they are moving out, and see whether these tenants should be on the Section 8 or they should be discontinued, depending on the apartment condition.
Yeah, I mean, Section 8 is just, I mean, I don't even like to get involved with that. It's so crazy. You know, it's funny too, because Section 8, the tenants, I've had Section 8 tenants call me up and they had terrible problems. And I said, okay, fine, we'll get you a 7-day notice. We'll get you out of there. And they said, oh, I'm Section 8. I'll lose my voucher. And the housing authority wouldn't even help them. So, I mean, I just think that that's, you know, this program that's supposed to help tenants, and they're often in some cases worse off because the housing authority won't step up for them. So, and then the other crazy thing, and just a million crazy things about it. I mean, you have to use your regular lease, and half of it doesn't apply. I mean, I was thinking I wanted to write a special Section 8 lease that had the Section 8 rules. Like, oh, you can't do that. You have to have this regular lease that applies to regular tenants. Half of it doesn't apply. And it's just, like I said, it's just, that to me is the sort of the epitome of why I wouldn't want to get involved with that, because there's all these crazy rules and regulations, and you lose the control, as you said, lose the control over your business. And, you know, the best thing for landlords is you got to keep control of the tenants, you know, in terms of who you're picking. I mean, picking good tenants is absolutely vital. And so if you're that's taken away from you, it's a disaster. At the same time, you know, you obviously don't want to discriminate. You want to be as fair as you can about it. But, you know, having, you know, I keep coming back to the month to month, you know, you're happy, they're happy. That's the absolute best thing you want to do. And any way you can come up with that where both sides are happy, that's a win-win situation. And that's what we have to be moving towards as, you know, as landlords, is trying to have a situation where we need to think about that, keeping tenants happy, because we're in the situation we are now because of a lot of unhappy tenants. So we just want to keep trying as much as we can to do the best we can for everybody.
So what about that moving checklist I mentioned? Is it okay?
I mean, great. I mean, here's the thing. Here's a problem here's the thing I would say. You can't, here's what the Supreme Court said. We had a case called Southgate in the Supreme Court, and some landlords were saying, you have to give you back that checklist within 72 hours or some 48 hours or some time, whatever, some time frame. And if you don't, there's a conclusive legal presumption that there's nothing wrong with the unit, and we're not going to fix anything. We're not going to fix anything if you don't do it. That I had a problem with, you know, because again, you know, it's fine as a tool. And if for you in particular, if you do a checklist and you can see there's nothing wrong and you check everything off, if the tenant wants to object to that, that's very useful. But to say just because you didn't object, that means everything's fine automatically, I mean, I just don't think that flies. If they come in and say, oh, well, we discovered this thing that was hidden and we couldn't find it, or there's some other problem we didn't see, you still need to fix it. It's not a way to get out of your obligations to fix stuff. And if they come up later and say there's still a problem, but here's if it's vandalism. I mean, if you come in 6 months into the tenancy and there's been no burglary report and nothing, and there's a big shoe print in the middle of the, you know, the bathroom or something, the mirror, then I think you have enough evidence that they did it. You know, no one else can get in there. It's obviously broken by somebody. You did it. So I think that's a different issue, though.
Yeah, those are the kind of thing I'm talking about. Stain in the carpet, or hole in the carpet, or hole in your linoleum. Or
here's what I would say: it's fine to do. It's a great idea to do the checklist, right? But you can't stop them from coming in and saying that stain was already there, right? And it need to leave it to the court to decide. You're not going to be able to conclusively win the case automatically by some way of doing a checklist or lease or something like that. You're just going to have to let the evidence speak for itself. And it's great to have, if you have a picture and you can show the carpet and there's no stains on it, and then at the end of the tenancy, there's a big stain. Wow, that's great evidence, you know? But what I was seeing was landlords trying to say, well, you didn't turn the form in, so you're screwed, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's not appropriate.
No,
And the
that's
courts
not
aren't
allowed.
accepting that.
No.
So it's a great tool. It's very useful, but like anything else, it has its limits in terms of like doing a gotcha. You don't want to do gotchas.
No.
Well, we are getting close to the wind down time. Anybody else wanted to have a question answered that didn't get a chance?
No, I'm sorry. Push it again.
Okay, no, you don't have to be sorry. I'm just saying that if there's somebody here that had a burning question they wanted to ask, I just want to emphasize one thing that Christopher said today that I want to take to our people for the future. And so we'll get it under this video recording. And the one thing you said that really resonated with me is we have so many people that come in with some kind of a default that's happening, and they want to use a 7-day notice to cure default. That's a complicated action. The same thing with clear and present danger. You would think a clear and present danger would be a cut and dry deal, and you go down to the courthouse and you've got maybe even you've called up the police officer to be a witness. Well, first you got to get them to come, and that's a challenge. But then you got to have them write a citation in the first place. And we've had landlords show up at the clear and present danger with $1,700 worth of glass breakage done the night before, and they're looking at this tenant. They'd just been at the house. This tenant smashed out the picture window and 2 other windows in the property, and that case got dismissed. They had a legal aid attorney there, and the case got dismissed. He couldn't get his clear and present danger done. So I think what Christopher's saying, and occasionally gets something into my thick skull that makes so much sense, is if you have a month-to-month lease, you don't have to have a reason. You just say and in fact, in Iowa, I think it's still true that you don't have to show cause.
Right.
You don't have to tell them why the reason. I'm just not renewing it. I'm thinking about selling it, or, I've got a cousin that's moving to town, and, maybe we'll clean it up and we'll sell it to them. I don't know, but this is not working for me. So at the end of this next month, you have to leave. And I think that's the point you're making, is that it's easier to perfect this in court than any other thing you're working on.
Yeah, I was going to say, I want to go back and just say a little bit about it.
Great.
Here's what I would say about terminating the month-to-month. They should be a problem tenant. That's why you're getting rid of them. And you don't have to prove that, right? But you should have that reason. You should have that in the background. And if the tenant pushes you, you should tell them and be honest with them about it. And the same thing with the judge. But you don't have to prove it. Now, the tenant's going to come back and say, that's not true, that's not true. But you don't have to prove it. But it is a good idea to have a good reason that you can articulate to them. And don't say, I don't have to tell you. That's really, because then you may end up with a disability complaint or something like that. You don't want to go down that road. But nevertheless, you don't have to prove it. And this is what I would say about it. Clear and present danger FEDs, Andrew's 100% right. Don't do it if you can avoid it, okay? I'd prefer to do a lease violation. Now, the 7-day one is a problematic, because if they smash that glass up, right, you got to give them another chance, right? You say 7 days, you're like, okay, I won't do it again. You can't get them out immediately. Whereas, like I said, the month-to-month, the beauty of it, boom, you just say, I'm terminating you, right? Now, you got to give them 30 days notice before the end of the month for which you're terminating. It's a little hard to think about that, but it's real easy to do, because at the end of the month, you could terminate. And in order to terminate that, you got to give them 30 days. So unless it's a month like January that's 31 days, you're generally going to have to give them a little extra time. It will be more than 30 days. But it's real easy because it always ends at the end of the month. But yeah, that's what I would say about it, is that if I'm going to do an FED, it used to be I would prefer unpaid rent FED. That was those are beautiful, because the magistrates were real used to them. It was real easy to do. Boom, 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 they're out. But now it's really basically a holdover. You terminate the tenancy, right? You give them that 30 days, you give them that notice, and then you do notice to quit, right? And then you do the FED. And so, I should probably do a whole thing on how to do a holdover FEDs for everybody if they're not clear on that. But I think that's what I would say, is that really the easiest, the preferred FED is going to be a holdover when you terminate that month-to-month. And that's going to be the easiest way to get the tenant out of there for any reason. So good. Well, it's funny because if I hammer on, eventually stuff gets through. So I'm glad Andrew is always great to talk to about this stuff.
Can I jump in for 1 second for the last question? On that moving checklist I was talking about, if you provide the judge the move out report from the previous tenant, and if you provide them that you refunded their deposit because the apartment was in a good condition before they move in, is that something holds on the court?
I mean, it's all evidence, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
all evidence. And so
It's
what you want to
evidence.
do is, as much as you can, you want to bolster your case, right?
Yeah.
The more evidence you have, the higher quality that evidence is, the better your case is. There's no way to avoid being sued, right? Because you can always get sued for things, and there's no way to 100% win. But you can sure improve your chances of winning. The more evidence you have, the better you have. And pictures are great. That's what I say to tenants.
Yeah.
You know, I say, take a lot of pictures. Because people come to me and say, oh, they took the money on my deposit. I said, do you have any pictures? They're like, no. I said, forget about it then. I mean, how are you going to win your case when you have no evidence, right? And that's just not, and the same thing with the landlords is that, you know, the checklist is useful, but just don't think of it as a gotcha or think of it as a 100% solution to your problem. Oh, I have a checklist, so I don't have to do anything else. You know, really, to me, the gold standard would be a checklist plus pictures. Then you really are in a state to be able to say, you know what? The state of this place was immaculate. It's perfect. It had brand new carpeting. And look at it now. It's trashed. You can look at these pictures. You can see the pictures, how about it's trash. So here's the beginning. Here's the end. Even in Polk County, that to me would be a pretty much a winning case.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we conclude this, I want to give a little pitch to Christopher being available again in January, on January the 8th. We haven't determined whether they're going to do this live. I think we're about 90% sure we're going to do the training on Zoom. But this January the 8th is a Friday. And in the morning, we're going to have Lisa and Lisa Denda with me and e-filing with me. And then the afternoon, you're going to get to have 3 hours with Christopher on the nuts and bolts of Iowa 562A and a law update. I'm quite certain that if Christopher wanted to, he could probably talk the entire week.
I talk your ear off.
For a week about that is so complicated. I've spent 9 years doing this gig here on January 1st of this next year, Christopher. You would think I'd have 562A memorized by now. But it is a complicated chapter of the code, and my hat's off to every single landlord that shows up to these meetings, because you guys are out in the trenches doing something in a climate right now that it's been as adverse to a landlord as I've ever seen in my lifetime. And you're to be commended for taking time today to come and inform yourself. I truly appreciate your membership. I hope we're helping you. If we're not as much as you'd like, then come to this training on January 8th. You'll have opportunities again to ask detailed questions. I've never had a conversation with Christopher Warnock where he said, okay, that's enough. I can't take any more. He's always open to talking about landlord tenant law. So that's one of the reasons we're honored to have you today. I truly thank you. And we're talking to one of the best in the state of Iowa on landlord tenant law. So folks, I just hope you come and get the word out to those other people that missed today. When we send this information out about the training that will be available, be sure to share it with them. And with that, I got to ask, is there anybody have any haves or wants that you came to the meeting today that you need to share?
I got a want. What is the time on this January 8th event?
Oh, it starts at 8 o'clock in the morning. It'll go to noon for the first 2 sessions. And then the third session, I guess, starts at 1 o'clock and it'll go to 4. That's the current plan.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Andrew, this is Craig Wetzel.
Yes, sir.
I have a fire damaged home. It's not damaged tremendously bad, maybe 40,000 of rehab at 1464 East 21st Street. And that insurance settlement has come in, so it would be able, somebody be able to buy the lot and the house and redo it for $20,000.
Okay, so you think $20,000 worth of rehab expenses would be involved, and
Yeah,
you could get
40
the,
to 45,000 to rehab it. And the
Oh.
value in that neighborhood is about 108. And the rental would be about 850. It's a 2-bedroom.
What was that address again, Craig?
1464 East 21st Street.
In
You're
Des
gonna
Moines?
have to have a star bit from the city's board up if you're gonna go in.
Oh, okay. So maybe we could get you to do a little flyer on that. We could circulate around.
We could,
That would be awesome. So this is for sale.
yeah.
Okay.
It's the
I'm
one that
familiar
it's
with
the
the
one
property.
that
Yep.
Andrew, it's the one that you evicted the tenant, and then some reason or another, about a week later, the garbage can started on fire.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't evict him. You evicted him. I just was a paper carrier.
Right.
That's all I was. But we got him served, and he was kind of a pain in the neck. But on the way out, as a kind gesture to his wonderful landlord he said, well, let's burn the place down. So he started a fire in the garbage can and caught the house on fire. Oh, isn't that
It's not
special?
burnt. It's not burnt all the way down, but it certainly has potential to be built back. I just have too many projects to take it on.
Okay. We'll get some
And
details from you. Anybody else have a detailed question on that right now for
Yes,
Craig?
and the insurance would go to you or to the person who buys it?
I'm sorry, you'll have to speak louder. I couldn't hear.
Sorry, this is Linda Milam. Would the insurance payment go to the person who bought it, or would the insurance payment stay with you?
No, we settled at a price that was less than what I was expecting, and so I'm going to keep the insurance and just sell the lot with the remaining house. It does have a single garage.
Okay.
Oh, have you put a price tag on it?
Yeah, 20,000.
Oh, for the lot with what's existing on the house?
The lot, the existing home, and the garage, yes.
Oh, okay. And you're estimating rehab around 40,000. So you could be into it for 60 and it's worth 108.
Right.
Wow.
And that depends on who you hire for rehab. You might spend 5 or 10 more than that, but that's where I estimate it.
Oh, great. Well, are you going to be available in tonight's meeting?
Yes.
Okay, because that's a group of really what might appeal to. So thank you.
Well, I just thought maybe a landlord would be out there that was looking for a 2-bedroom, but I don't know if these landlords that are on here do any rehabbing.
Craig, what's your
Sure.
phone number?
Sure.
515-707-7400.
Thank you.
Wow. Okay. Anyone else have a have or a want? Okay, well then we'll move on to unfinished business. Does anybody know of unfinished business that we said was something we were going to do and we didn't get done, or something we needed to talk about further?
Oh, yeah, Andrew, yes.
Got 100
on that,
things we
I
didn't
got a
get
lot of-
done. I'll guarantee you that.
Yeah.
But
that at the beginning, we are talking about this license holder property manager they are on your payroll, they are working for you. So the person they are on our payroll, they can go to the court and conduct the business for you, right?
yeah, if they're on a W-2,
Yes.
yes. Yeah, anybody
can.
you hire as a landlord, you're in business. And
Okay.
they don't have to have a license to do your property management. No, they work
Okay.
for you. You own the place. It's
Okay,
just
that's
that
good.
contractor who is the part-time person, and a lot of people don't want to get involved in withholding deductions from their paychecks.
Yes.
And so they skirt around that and say, well, I don't want to pay this, the matching Social Security tax. Well, then you don't get to be someone that's supervising this person who's an unlicensed professional doing what requires a license to do.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, does it happen? It happens all the time. but you are exposing yourselves to some liability. Same thing is true with workers' compensation. Incidentally, we had a person from Iowa Workforce Development come and speak to us one time. If you buy materials as a landlord and you give them to some contractor who they're just selling you the labor, who's responsible if there's a fire, or who's responsible if there's a liability, a damage? One of his employees falls off the roof and falls on your asphalt and breaks a leg. Who has the liability?
Well, if the contractor or the subcontractor, if they have their liability insurance, then their liability will pay them. If not, it will come to our workman comp.
Well, you would hope it would be that way, but that insurance company is going to say, look, who bought the materials? I'm going after your insurance policy to cover this instead of ours, because you are actually the contractor. You bought the materials. That's what he said. Now, I don't know. That's what he said, is if you are doing a job, whoever buys the materials is the general contractor that has liability for the job.
Okay.
So and the reason the insurance company won't back them up is, well, do insurance companies like to pay out claims?
No way.
Not that I'm aware of. I've never heard of it, but maybe. But anyhow, that's the thing. And so, just as aside, training January 8th, and other than that, it's time. It's past time, and everybody, I hope until Santa Claus can bring you a better present, I'll just say, have a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever you need.
Thanks for watching. We hope this production empowered your business. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more great content. And don't forget to join us in person for powerful networking and priceless information at our next live event. For all event information, please go to our website,